listener production.
Hi, Natarsha Belling with you and welcome to the afternoon edition of The Briefing. Well, the Liberal Party is today in tatters after the weekend's election bloodbath, the worst defeat in the party's history. So who will replace Peter Dutton as leader and what's next for a party that's been decimated with no clear path forward? We're joined by political editor from 7 News, Mark Riley, who shares what went so horribly wrong for the coalition and how the broken party can rebuild and win back voters. But first, let's check the afternoon headlines this Monday, the 5th of May. Anthony Albanese is back in Canberra and says he's spoken with Donald Trump since winning the weekend's election. The Prime Minister says the US President congratulated him on the win and they'll catch up in person sometime soon.
We talked about how AUKUS and tariffs will continue to engage. We will engage with each other on a face-to-face basis at some time.
Meantime, Donald Trump has announced more tariffs to protect Hollywood. He wants a 100% tariff on any movie made outside the US, including Australia, accusing other countries of luring studios with cash and spreading propaganda. The US president says he wants, quotes, movies made in America again. The move will be a major blow to Australia's $2 billion a year film industry. The mushroom murder trial continues with the court hearing Erin Patterson accused her husband of being a bare minimum parent. Text messages were shared in court which allege Simon Patterson had changed details on a tax return which meant he didn't have to pay child support. Erin is accused of murdering 3 people during the Beef Wellington lunch. She has pled not guilty to all charges. And now the federal election is over. Another history-making vote is about to get underway. The Cardinals will enter the conclave in the Sistine Chapel in Vatican City on Wednesday to hold the secret vote for the next pope. The new pope must receive at least 2/3 of the votes. And after every vote, a smoke signal is sent from the chapel's chimney. White smoke means a pope has been chosen and black means they haven't. Now it's time to get into our deep dive with 7 News political editor Mark Riley on the fallout from the bloodbath for the Liberal Party at the federal election over the weekend. So what's next for the Liberals and who should replace Peter Dutton as leader? Mark, thanks so much for your time. You've been a political journalist for a long time. I think this is your 11th federal election. My reaction after Saturday night was, wow. Is that how you felt? Even Labor didn't predict this type of landslide win.
No. Yeah, wow was my response on the night too, Tash, because we're trying to find reasons to tell us that what we were seeing wasn't what we were seeing, and there were none. So I think there was a bit of a lesson in it throughout the 5 weeks of the campaign, certainly on Saturday night. We were looking for evidence of a swing against Labor. And what we should have been looking for was evidence of a swing against the coalition and to Labor, which was quite extraordinary. So to be frank, on the campaign trail, as there were the leaders for the 5 weeks, again, we were looking for the supposed anger from voters towards Labor federally. Now, we didn't find that. There was no evidence of that. What we didn't pick up was such a sharp turn away from the coalition, but that was absolutely there in those numbers. It is the worst result for the Federal Liberal Party in its history, the modern Liberal Party. 80 years, never done worse than it did on Saturday night. In fact, by quite a magnitude. Even the really bad results, 2007 landslide, the 1983 landslide, the 1972 landslide against it, it still had 50 seats. It hasn't got 40 today. It might get to 40, but it hasn't got 40 seats in a parliament of 150. And Labor looks like getting close to 90. So that is an epic loss. The first time an opposition leader from any side has led to an election, lost the election and lost their own seat. So that's an ignominious title for Peter Dutton. A couple of prime ministers have done it. Stanley Melbourne Bruce in 1929 was the first. John Howard was the second, 2007, but never an opposition leader. And for a Labor leader. First time since Bob Hawke in 1990, the Labor leader's been re-elected. First time since John Howard in 2004 that any Prime Minister has been re-elected. So we've got something we haven't had for 21 years, Tash, continuity at the top.
Yes. The blame game has well and truly begun on what went so horribly wrong for the coalition. As you said, the worst defeat in their history as a party. I'm seeing a lot of speculation coming out from the seat of Dickson that it seemed to be they did not like Peter Dutton as a leader, as well as the policies, but that apparently from within his own party, they kept those concerning polls from him because it would rattle him. Is that true?
It's certainly true that that happens, and I know that has happened previously. I don't have the evidence that occurred with Peter Dutton in this campaign yet, but I know it has happened with leaders of the past. So two things normally happen in election campaigns. If a leader's ahead, they sometimes let them in on the polling. If they're behind, they never do. And they only show them the good parts. Now, there were a couple of occasions there, particularly in the last week, where Peter Dutton said, well, I don't know about these published polls, which were bad, but weren't as bad as the real situation. He said, I don't know about these published polls because our internal poll is much better. I don't know what they were showing him, but whatever they were showing him was rubbish. The fact about Dickson, I think it's a really interesting case, more emblematic of what happened across the electorate, but particularly intensely in Dickson. People voted Teal and Dickson, and Liberal voters voted Teal and Dickson as a protest against the sitting member, Peter Dutton. They couldn't bring themselves to vote for the Labor, so they voted Teal. But their vote went to Labor because Teal's preferenced Labor. And that is what did Peter Dutton in the neck in the end. So he lost on the left to the Labor Party, he lost on the right to the Teals, and he lost both ways in the end. And that happened in a lot of seats on Saturday night, which took us from a little bit of a surprise, as did the rise of the Teals in 2022. So the other thing that also exemplifies, which is a very interesting characteristic of our new vibrant democracy in Australia, the highest primary vote on Saturday night, I think I'm still right on that, was with somebody other than Labor and the Liberals and the Nationals. It was for a third way anyway, but not these two majors. There was something like 35% of people voted for somebody other than Labor or the Coalition, and 34% for Labor, 31% for the Libs, and that's...
And Miles, in regards to what happens now, we know Peter Dutton will no longer be a politician. He's lost his seat. In regards to who is next, there are a number of candidates. Who do you think is the front runner to lead the Liberal Party through this incredibly difficult rebuild?
Yeah, so it's a numbers game politics. The numbers would be behind Angus Taylor, who's from the New South Wales right of the party. The Queensland right of the party is more probably the largest single group within the party room, and they would be more likely to shift behind Angus Taylor than the other candidates who've emerged. Probably the long-term leader for the Liberal Party may not even be in the parliament. I mean, it's a poison chalice. It's a very difficult, thankless job to pick up the pieces after a thumping election loss. They found themselves in a position where the Conservative part of their policy prescription has been roundly rejected by the electorate. Yet the moderates in the party have been voted out. There was a lot of them who lost their seats to Teals in 2022. There were a couple of other significant figures, Simon Birmingham and others, who've left the party since then. Of course, they could see what was coming. And there are others who are of a progressive disposition. Keith Wallahan in Menzies was probably the hope of the side for them for the future, lost his seat on Saturday night, and others as well. So the Conservative faction of the broad church that John Howard used to talk about, Conservatives on one part of the aisle, small L Liberal progressives on the other side of the aisle in the great Menzian tradition, or the small L Liberals, the progressives have been excommunicated, you're left with the Conservatives, yet a party that needs to reframe itself in the middle of that aisle, or more to the progressive side. There's no one there to do that other than Susan Lee. But Susan doesn't have the numbers in the party room. She's of an agenda that the Liberal Party hasn't gone to ever as a leader. And you remember Robin Bishop, when she clicked her red heels and left politics, she said, I asked her in that press conference, do you think the Liberal Party will ever bring itself to elect a female leader? And she said, well, they had the chance and they have it. So Susan's the option that would be a progressive face or a moderate face for the Liberal Party, but doesn't have the numbers. And this is a brutal numbers game, politics. We have Dan Tehan from Victoria. Don't think he can muster the numbers at the moment and untested. And you have Andrew Hastie as a real roll of the dice option who is next generation. A couple of problems with Andrew. If he does represent the future of the party, he needs to be repositioned because he is of the conservative side of the party, really a traditional Abbott conservative, a Howard conservative, campaigned against same-sex marriage, voted against it. A lot of them campaigned and didn't vote. He also said some uncomfortable comments in the past about the role of women in the military, which he's had to walk back. And he's really seen as a member of that muscular conservative side of the party, a bit like Dutton and Abbott and Howard, and the party needs to move away from that. But also, because it's such a thankless job and the chances of survival for the first-term leader after such an epic defeat are very slight, his leadership could be burnt too early. And I think the best advice to Andrew would be to bide his time to reshape himself a little in their community's eyes first. But the long-term leader may not even be in the party. There's a couple of people in the Senate who should be in the lower house, so they'd have better options. People like James Patterson, who I think is the hope of the conservative side of politics in the coalition party. Very good politician, great communicator, strategically sharp, good on the big issues, economy, national security. Jane Hume from Victoria, Senator, also a good communicator, very sharp, comes out of the financial world, knows the economy. Wrong house. So unfortunately for them, the better options are not in the house where they need to be, and whether they can manufacture a change over the next 3 years or draft in someone else that we don't know yet from another part from the party more broadly in other parts of Australia or from outside of the party altogether. They don't have great options at the moment.
So the blame game has well and truly begun. I'm sure there's a lot of Liberal people coming out, insiders coming out, basically inferring what went so horribly wrong. You don't want to kick someone when they are down, but even today we've seen Donald Trump come out and say he doesn't even know who Peter Dutton is. How damaging do you think his leadership qualities were to the campaign, Mark? And then what policies didn't the Australian voters like?
You're right. It's hard to kick a man when he's down, but Peter Dutton as a leader was rejected by the Australian people on Saturday night. That's just a fact. I think Australian voters did associate him, in a way, in the broad, with a more Trump-like approach, certainly than Albanese did. One was an expectation that he might bring in Trump-like policies. He had a Doge. That was part of his plan, the Department of Government Efficiency that Jacinta Price was going to be the head of, to cut through the bureaucracy. He had a plan to cut 41,000 public servants, which cuts service to the public, has to, which is very Trumpian. And there were other elements there of his policy suites that were Trump-like, but Trump-light. And I think the other thing, which is more subtle, but I think it is a major factor in this election, is that because Trump is such a large figure, he has an impact way beyond, obviously, the boundaries of the United States, and he has an impact here. I said at one stage this was like Charles and Diana's marriage. There was a third person in this relationship.
Yes.
And it was Donald Trump. And I think Australian people philosophically thought, well, if that's change, and here's a guy, Peter Dutton, who's prosecuting a case for change. If that's change, what's going over there? We don't want it.
Ros, for you, it's 2025. The Liberal Party has been decimated. What should the Liberal Party stand for? Because they need to get back to their values, so they're appealing once again to the Australian voter.
Yeah, so exactly. So it has to reassess that, Tash, and it has to find a position where it can bring back that other side of the church. It can open the church doors and fill those pews on the progressive side, because at the moment they've been decimated. So really, I think for Peter Dutton, he saw it as beyond his ability, but also, or capability, but also unnecessary to go into those teal seats where the natural constituency of the progressive side of the Liberal Party resides and try and win those people back. He did very little to win those teal voters back to the coalition. That's the challenge for the next Liberal Party leader. And that's why it is such a difficult thing for that person to do, because it looks like they'll come from the Conservative side of the party, yet they need to appeal to the other side. So it's somebody who has a generosity and who can accept all comers within the party to put the party back together. Whoever it is needs to open their arms to the progressives, to forget about all this binary collision of policy where everything seems to be combustible and everything's a fight, everything's presented as, aggressively as a tough proposition. Be a bit more generous, welcome other comers, and look to your, not necessarily to your left as much, but to the centre, and bring those voters back, appeal to those teal seats. The problem there, once they've been voted in twice, it's very, very difficult to turn those seats back. Very difficult.
Congratulations on your outstanding coverage during the election campaign, Mark Riley from 7 News. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
That was 7 News political editor Mark Riley. And that's it for this episode of the afternoon edition of The Briefing. We'd love you to subscribe or follow us so you don't miss our episodes or our deep dive of the day. You can also follow us on our socials, on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast, and also on TikTok and YouTube. You just need to search Listener Newsroom, spelt LISTNR. And we'll be back in your feed tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. I'm Natarsha Belling. Thanks for your company. See you then.